Now we're going to continue with our teaching on the book of Hebrews. Amen. Our Father, be with us with this little midrash. Make your words sweet to our mouth. B'Shem Yeshua Mashiach, Amen. And have a little bit of a drink here. So if you take your books, we're going to be starting somewhere in chapter 4. That's where we left last time. Okay. We'll start chapter 4:14, verse 4:14. Okay. So here's the thing. Again, I will start with a little synopsis. The letter to the Hebrews was written to an Israeli Messianic community in dire strait, in trouble. They faced persecution from their brethren and from the Romans. As a result, they faced economic hardships and social isolation, which caused emotional distress. The writer's goal is to encourage the people to not lose faith in the captain of their salvation. And he does this by means of comparisons. In many ways, he tells them that if the words of Moshe and the prophets, as well as of angels, were to be feared in the past, how much more should we fear and respect and give honor to the words of Yeshua? In chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, he tells them that the word of Yeshua are more authoritative than that of the prophets of old. In verses 1 through 4, in chapter 1, verse 4 till the end of chapter 2, using proof text, mostly from Isaiah and the Psalms, the author convinces us that Yeshua is greater than even the angels. In chapter 3, verses 1 through 9, the author will shows us that Yeshua is greater than Moshe. From verse 10 on, he will make a point to tell us that if the people who disobeyed Moshe were punished, how much more dreadful is it to disobey the Son of the Almighty? In our next section, the author will now explain an allusion previously made, an allusion that whoever understands Jewish text, theology, Torah, and ideas, and it's an allusion that may have raised some eyebrows. And this is the allusion I'm talking about. In Hebrews 3, 1, the writer says, "Therefore, holy brothers, you who share in a heavenly calling, consider Yeshua, the apostle," that's okay, Yeshua, Shaliach from God. He was sent from God. That's what the Shaliach is, somebody who's sent on a mission. "And high priest of our confession." Ooh, high priest. Because Yeshua is not from the tribe of Levi, but from the tribe of Judah, it is possible that some may have a hard time with the idea of calling Yeshua a high priest. But the writer seems to know very well what he's talking about. He knows Judaism. He knows the Torah. So in the next verses, he's going to make a point to explain why he calls Yeshua a high priest. Which for us, maybe for people, it might say, well, so what? But for Jewish people, it is like, if you don't understand, it could be considered blasphemy, because only the sons of Aaron can be priests. So, we will start this explanation at Hebrews 4, verse 14. He says, "Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens." So, again, he's doing it. He's going back to where he was. And so here's the thing. Before Yeshua we had priests, then we had high priests, but now we have priest, high priest, and a great high priest. So there's an extra level here. "Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens," Yeshua, the Son of God. And we've talked last week how he says Yeshua. That comes from 2 Samuel 7. "Let us hold fast to our confession. Let's not let go. We must let go of our. We must not let go of our belief, of our faith." So here now the next comparison he's gonna make. I was telling you, he's making this point of how great Yeshua by using comparison. So he says, we respected our priest, we respected our high priest, but this one, Yeshua, is a great high priest. So he's giving him a higher position and title, I guess. You see, he's not calling him a high priest, he's calling him a great high priest. He's saying he's bigger, more important, greater than the high priest. And then he explains why. He's a great high priest because he is special in that he passed through the heavens. No other high priest has done that. That's why he is special. That's what the verse says. "Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens." He's saying, hey, look, this guy is better than the high priest than we had. He's got more power. Our brethren, they have a simple high priest, the house of Caiaphas. We have a great high priest who's passed through the heaven. Hey, come on. It doesn't get any better than that. Should we believe him and give him respect? Even more respect than we gave to the ordinary priest and high priest who never passed through the heavens? With this type of high priest, aren't we safe, secure? Shouldn't we hold fast to our confession? Hebrews 4:15. "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses." Now he's going to talk about this high priest, this great high priest that Yeshua is. He's not a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. So, now this is a little dig. This is a little dig on the priesthood and high priesthood. You see, the high priests of the day were very, very, very elitist. They had special pathways made for them in Jerusalem so they could walk without being contaminated by others. They were rich. They couldn't relate to the common folks. They actually looked down on other people. They prided in their title, because they felt they were better than others. They were very, very proud, elitist. Should I use the word arrogant? They couldn't relate to the common folks. The common folks couldn't relate to them. But Yeshua was different. He could sympathize with our weakness. The high priest of the day couldn't. Their lack of compassion was very well portrayed in the parable of the Good Samaritan that Yeshua used to answer the question, "Who is my brother?" In Luke 10:30, 31 and 32, Yeshua answers that question, who is my brother, by replying, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed him, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was going down that road. Wow, a religious person, of course, he's going to take care of them, right? He's a religious person, that's what religion's all about. But when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Oh, he was not going to get contaminated by touching that blood. Oh, no, we don't do that. So likewise a Levite, even lower than the priest, a Levite who came to that place and saw him, he passed on the other side. Oh, well, I'm a Levite, I don't want to get involved with trouble. And you know the rest of the story. They didn't want to get contaminated, so they used that as an excuse for their lack of care, their lack of compassion, their lack of altruism, and in order to justify their indifference towards the needy world around them. Religion, quote unquote, should make us reach out. If our quote unquote religion doesn't make us reach out, something's wrong. So again, Hebrews 4:15. We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. He's one of us. Yes. He understands us because he's been tempted in the same way we are. He can be a proper representative because he understands it. He can represent us in front of God. So, having such a representation before the throne of God, that Yeshua, who represents us, who vouches for us, who intercedes for us, who pleads for us, the author says in verse 16, let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. A new little song like that, but with the King James Version, and it goes this way. Let us therefore come boldly be unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Boom, boom, boom. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Boom, boom, boom. Well, after this great emotional endorsement of Yeshua as a legitimate high priest, our writer is going to give us the theology behind the fact, behind the idea, behind his logic. It's good to have inspiration, but there's got to be some sort of documentation. There's got to be some sort of something concrete. So here he goes. Chapter 5, verse 1. For every high priest chosen from among men is appointed to act on behalf of man in relation to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. That's the job of any priest. A priest is really the connection between God and man. Verse 2. He can deal gently with the ignorant and wayward, since he himself is beset with weakness. There might be a bit of sarcasm there, because really what he's meaning, he should. This high priest who comes before God to represent us, he should be kind to us because he himself is beset with sin, with weakness. Verse 3. Because of this, he is obligated to offer sacrifices for his own sins, just as he does for those of the people. You see, because he himself beset is with weakness. He's a human. So because of this, before he can even represent us, he's supposed to offer offerings for himself. So he's a fit high priest, or fit priest. That makes sense, right? Verse 4. But no one takes this honor upon himself to be a priest, but only when called by God, just as Aaron was. So again, this is another dig at the local priesthood. He says no one can take this honor upon themselves, but only when called by God. It's God who establishes who is the high priest. It's God who chooses, just like he did with Aaron through Moses. So the priesthood in Jerusalem in those days, though it was supposed to be appointed by God, in those days it was appointed by the Romans. You see, the Romans held the priestly garments hostage, so that whoever wanted to be high priest would have to go to the Roman, and the Romans would offer it to the highest bidder. They didn't care. So this is why we hear all this Anna Caiaphas and all these Caiaphases. The Caiaphas family was overbidding each other to be high priests, and the Romans gave it to the highest bidder. So that's how it was established. So he says again, we have this high priest over there. He's Roman appointed, he's a collaborator, he's yak. But Yeshua, he's appointed by God, So the writer really reminds them of their present day political situation, which then sheds a little bit of a doubt on their present day temple priesthood. You see, he tells them only someone called by God, like Aaron was, can be priest. It's not the Romans to decide. But was then Yeshua appointed by God? Yes, the writer says, and he proves it with scripture. In Hebrews 5:5 he says, so also Yeshua did not exalt himself to be made high priest, but was appointed by him who said to him, you are my son, today I have begotten you. That word, yaladeticha, that means I have childed you, I have sired you. It's in Psalm. This is found in Psalms 2. It's a magnificent psalm, and Jews knew that this psalm was about Mashiach. Here, let's read it. Why do the nations rage and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart, and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs, the Lord holds them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and terrify them in his fury, saying, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, today, he said, you are my son, today I have begotten. Not created. I have begotten you, I have sired you. Where does this come from? Really, I'm going to take a little break there. Where does this come from? This comes from 2 Samuel 7. When David, the author of this psalm, is told by Nathan the prophet that he will not build a temple, but that his descendant will build a temple for God, and that this descendant who will build the temple for God will be called Son of God. You can read it in 2 Samuel 7. Verse 8 of Psalm 2. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with the rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore, O kings, be wise and be warned. O rulers of the earth, serve the Lord with fear, rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. Beautiful, magnificent psalm. Messianic psalm that the writer of the letter to the Hebrews brings on to Yeshua as Mashiach. The writer continues, Hebrews 5:6 says that the Torah says, the Psalms, King David, whose descendant is that Mashiach who built the temple, says in another place. I love when Paul says it, the writer saying in another place. That means he forgot, and that happens to me a lot. I know it says it somewhere in the good book, He says, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Here, we're back in the Psalms. This time it's Psalms 110. Last week we did Psalm 8. Now we did 110 of the Messianic Psalms by excellence. They tell us who our Messiah is. So, Psalm 110. The Lord said unto my Lord. Adonai, Hashem said to Adonai, it says in the Hebrew Bible, Hashem said to Adonai, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord sends forth from Zion your mighty scepter. Again, it's very kingly. Rule in the midst of your enemies. He told the enemies, kiss the Son lest he be angry. He's going to get mad. It won't be good for you. So he tells him here, rules in the midst of your enemy. Your people will offer themselves freely on the day of your power. Wow, your people will offer themselves freely on the day of your power. In holy garments from the womb of the morning, the dew of your youth will be yours. Is that very poetic? The dew of your youth will be yours. The Lord has sworn and he will not change his mind. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand. He will shatter kings on the day of his wrath. He will execute judgment among the nations, filling them with corpses. He will execute judgment among the nations, filling them with corpses. He will shatter chiefs over the wide earth. He will shatter chiefs over the wide earth. He will drink from the brook by the way, therefore he will lift up his head. The earthly priesthood of Aaron was of the order, the earthly priesthood of the temple was of the order of Aaron. Only people from the descendants of Aaron could be priests. But the writer says here that Yeshua is a priest from another order, the order of Melchizedek. Who is this Melchizedek anyway? Let's read it in Genesis. So, here there was a time when Abraham was in the land, and his nephew departs from him. He wants to live in the big city. Abraham is a guy of the country. He wants to stay in the country. And Lot goes in the city, becomes a judge of the people of Sodom. And then there's some kings that come from the east to conquer, that come from Syria. And they want to come and conquer this whole area. And Abraham gathers his army and defeats them. And his goal is to free his his nephew Lot. And it says in Genesis 14:17-20, after his return from the defeat of Kedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of the Most High. It's the first time we hear of this guy. There was not even a priesthood. We're talking about the days of Abraham. Egypt hadn't even happened yet. He was priest. How could he be priest of God when there was no temple, not even an Aaron? Aaron hadn't been born yet. Aaron was not even a twinkle in Abraham's eyes. Verse 19 of Genesis 14. And he, Melchizedek blessed him. Melchizedek blessed Abraham. The greater blesses the lesser. He said, "Blessed be Abraham by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemy into your hand." Abraham is blessed by Melchizedek. Remember this for the next class. Abraham is blessed by Melchizedek. And then it says that Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. Abraham tithes to Melchizedek. So in a sense, and again you got to remember that for the next class, the priesthood of Aaron, which is inside Abraham's loins, tithes to the priesthood of Melchizedek. Wow. Remember that for the next class. Let it suffice for now to say that the writer has now explained that Yeshua can be a priest of the Most High without being of the descendants of Aaron, because he is not a priest from the order of Aaron. He is a priest in the order of Melchizedek. He's a different type of priest. As David prophesied by the Spirit of God that the Messiah, he who would build the eternal temple of God, would be. Hebrews 5:7. In the days of his flesh, I like how it says that, in the days of his flesh, Yeshua offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears. We'll remember that. We can read a lot of his prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears. Gethsemane and probably other places. We can read a lot of his prayers, a lot of his supplication. He prayed for his disciples, he prayed for the world, he prayed for Israel. With loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death. And he was heard. We're going to tell why. We're going to be told why he was heard. He was heard because of his reverence. He was heard because of his reverence. That's really important. You know, the next verse says, although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. Now, I don't know what that looked like. Many people ask me the question, what does that look like? Well, the only way I can answer that is that shows he was the son. Because a father only disciplines a son. He doesn't discipline the neighbor. You know, that shows he was a son. Now, what does it look like physically? I don't know. To be honest, I don't care. You know, but I believe it. I believe it. You see, that's what the reverence we're talking about. He was heard because of his reverence, although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. I mean, he had to learn obedience. He asked in Gethsemane, he asked, hey, let this pass from me. But then he said, not my will, but your will. In the desert, the devil tempted him. If he couldn't be tempted, why? It wouldn't be unfair. It would be like a not valid test. You know, he learned obedience through what he suffered. If you want to know what that means, ask him. Verse 9. And being made perfect, it doesn't say he was perfect. Being made perfect. Ooh. Many of us want to be perfect but don't want to be perfected. We want to be humble but we don't want to be humiliated. We want to be knowledgeable but we don't want to sit down and study. You know, being made perfect. You know, there's a statement in there, being made perfect. He became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. He became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him, being designated by God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. So what we have here is a Judaism in the order of Melchizedek. in Matthew 16 or Luke 16. I think it's Matthew 16 or 10 and Luke 16 somewhere. He gives the disciples, he told them, you shall sit on throne judging the tribes of Israel. He establishes the Messianic Sanhedrin. And we see in the book of Acts there is a Messianic Sanhedrin. And we have a priesthood. Our high priest is of the order of Melchizedek. So later on in Jeremiah there is two different sort of things. The tribe of Judah and the tribe of Levi will always have somebody to represent them. So one doesn't negate the other. They work together. Okay, so being designated by God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Now, the question really remains, what's the difference between the two priesthoods? So this I will answer solely according to the information I can glean from what we read. I'm not going to go and pull out something on my kippah and guess or tell you I got a revelation. I can only see what's written. Okay? What's the difference between the two priesthoods? The priesthood of Aaron was a priesthood of communication with Hashem, a priesthood of atonement, a priesthood that helps us approach Hashem. That's what the word korbanot means, to come near, to approach. It was a priesthood that allows us to communicate. And how do we know that? We know it by we're just starting to read the book of Leviticus by Yikra, right? The first, it explains the job of the priest with the korbanot. But the priesthood of Melchizedek was a different priesthood. To me, it's a priesthood having to do with salvation, freedom, and redemption. How do I know that? I know that because of his biblical appearance with Abraham. So I will now turn to Genesis 14. I will read the story. In the days of, I gotta get my paper. In the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Elazar, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim, these kings made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Birsha, king of Gomorrah, Shainab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. And all these joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years they had served Kedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim in Ashterot Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, and Emim in Shaveh Kiryataim. There's a place on the net you can find maps for every chapter. It's when you read something like that, it's good to have a map of that area in those days. And you can see where everything is. It gives you a really nice perspective. And the Horat and their hill country of Seir as far as El Paran and the border of the wilderness. All this is in the Negev, by the Dead Sea and around. Then they turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and defeated all the countries of the Amalekites and of all the Amorites who were dwelling at Hazazon Tamar. That's on the east side of the Jordan. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went out, and they joined battle in the valley of Siddim, with Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elazar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell into them, and the rest fled to the hill country. So the enemy took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, the son of Abraham's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way. Then one who had escaped came and told Abraham the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Avner. These were allies of Abraham. One who had escaped Came and told Abraham the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Avner. These were allies of Abraham. 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 Mamre, Amorite, these guys were really Canaanites who lived in the land of Canaan when Abraham arrived. It says these were allies of Abraham. When Abraham heard that his kinsman has been taken captive, he led forth his trained men born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And he divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Obah north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the possessions, and also brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions, and the women and the people. After his return from the defeat of Kedorlaomer, so he won the war, freed his nephew who really hadn't been nice to him. His nephew had been a bit of a, I won't use an adjective, but his nephew had been not very nice. But he went and freed him. After his return from the defeat of Kedorlaomer, that's verse 17, and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, that is King's Valley, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. They had kiddush, sanctification. That's what kiddush means. They brought no, they didn't have communion. They had kiddush. He was a priest of the Most High. So here we have this guy who appears on the scene. There is no priesthood, there is no temple, there is no Aaron, but he appears on the scene as a priest of the Most High. And he blessed them and said, "Blessed be Abraham by the Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And he blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And Abraham gave him 1/10 of everything. Melchizedek blessed Abraham for having liberated his family, his nephew, but also the people of the nations with him. Abraham is a foreshadow of Messiah who liberates his people, even though they haven't been nice to him, and the nations. When the Torah tells us, now I'm going to go into something here. When the Torah tells us that God blesses a man, it means that this man has a record of being accepted by God. I think I can safely affirm that. If God blesses a man, it's because he's accepted by him. It means that his actions please God. Maybe we should learn something from such a man. We see later on in this story that when Abraham, when the king of Sodom wanted to give Abraham, if you read the last verses, that when the king of Sodom wanted to give a gift, a reward to Abraham, Abraham said, "I'm not going to even take a shoelace from you. Nothing." So Abraham kept a real separate culture. He didn't want even to use the things of Sodom. He really kept a separate culture. But here's something else. That, like I always say, whenever we read something in the Torah, we need to always find the balance, because truth is in the balance. Extremes is not truth. Fundamentalism, extremism is not truth. The truth is in the middle of two extremes. So, was that separatism the way of Abraham, really? Was that his way? Let's go back in the story a bit. In chapter 12 of Genesis, Abraham, who's been told to leave his country, arrives in the land of the Canaanite, and it says it was inhabited. God says, "Hey, I want to give you this country." He said, "Well, there is somebody there already, and they don't really want to let you in." Thanks. So what did Abraham do? We read it in chapters 12, 13. He went to Egypt. That's where Sarah was taken. You can read the story yourself. But then, after that whole ordeal with Pharaoh, he came back and he settled, and if you read the names of the city, he settled in the Negev, near Hebron, the dates, and all that stuff, in the Negev. How come he did that then and he couldn't do it before? Why didn't he do that when he came? I don't know, I'm not told. To me, I always wondered why. But to me, the answer comes in chapter 14. In verse 14, it says that Mamre and his family, they were allies of the Canaanites. Allies of Abraham. Abraham struck some sort of deal. And we see later at the verse 24 of chapter 14 that this came to war with Abraham. Because when you have a covenant, this type of covenant means it's a defense treaty. Your enemy is my enemy. Somebody attacks you, it's like they attack me. It's like countries have treaties like this. And this is what Abraham had. We read it. In verse 24, they came there and he said, yeah, they can have their share. Because they fought the battle. So here we see an Abraham who, though he lived a very dedicated life, didn't want to have anything to do with unbelievers, in spite of that, he was able to make friends with the Canaanites of the land, the Amorites and everything. He was able to make friends and strike a deal of friendship. And later on that deal became helpful because they came to help him in that war. So this should teach us a lot about how to be able to, that we're supposed to live a life in the world, yet out of the world, yet connected with the world without being connected with the world. Somehow Abraham was able to do that. And maybe, and I will end with a couple of verses here, maybe this is what King Solomon commented when he said, that when you follow the Torah, we find favor in the sight of God and man. To find favor in the sight of God and man is a very hard act to manage. It says so in Proverbs 3, 1 through 4. It says, my son, do not forget my teaching. Let your heart keep my commandments, for length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablets of your heart. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. We please God and we please man. It's really tough, but it seems that this is what Abraham did. And Yeshua tells us, if you are children of Abraham, you need to do the deeds of Abraham. And we're all children of Abraham, biological and spiritual, covenantal. And one last verse from King Solomon says, it's Proverbs 16:7. When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. Those are lessons we learn from Abraham and why he was blessed by God. Okay, well, I hope you like this teaching. Now we're going to sing some songs.